you still, after every meal, would be offered fennel. It would have little cubes of sugar in it, but they think the same thing, that it prevents heartburn, it aids in digestion, takes care of gas. So that continues to the present day. The other thing about vernacular medicine, I'm working on maternal and infant health. Well, I was talking to people about medicine, and these Brahmins who should be temperate and never take alcohol, they said, oh yeah, we would give you brandy. And I said, well, how do you take brandy? Isn't that going against Brahmanical practice? They said, no, brandy is a medicine. We always had brandy in our medicine cabinet. And so they would give it for everything, including, I would get somewhat upset to nursing women, because they said, they would be, particularly in the hill stations, they would be very cold, and so you would want to warm them up. And I wondered about alcoholic poisoning of the infants. But, so what people consider a medicine,
yes,
but also the continuity of the fennel.
And this notion of brandy in liquor, because water was drinking, it was so tenuous. Most everything that they drank was some form of alcohol. And many of the books will have, The Treasure of Poor Men starts with 12 different remedies for waters. So there's aquavite, which is the water of life, it's the cure-all, basically it's moonshine. And then there are different other versions of water, and most of them are alcoholic, and they were given to everyone, children, the elderly, pregnant, well, sick, it didn't matter. John?
So you haven't, I know that in some ways all it takes is one source to say April 21st is the good day, and then both in the commonplace tradition that just gets reprinted. But it's so specific. Is it connected to something in the liturgical calendar? Is it?
It's close to spring, the start of spring, and the start of renewal. It's the only thing I can come up with, and it's consistent. I think that was one of the reasons it stuck out, is because one, it was very specific, and it was one of the first specific things I started to pick up, and then I had to backtrack. But it appears everywhere. But I don't have more of a solid explanation, because normally one of the interesting and irritating things as a researcher, a lot of this information has no context. So many of the remedies have no specific, you need a teaspoon. It's none of that. You just assume that they know how to diagnose it, and based on whether you're old or you're young, if you're heavy or you're slim, which temperament you are, you know how to mix it. There was this innate knowledge that people seem to have. And so then you get these dates that are just put there, and the only time you get a context is when they're arguing about them. So Thomas Painel in his book has an entire section about you can't pay attention to all the folklore that you hear, is basically what he's saying, because some of those days people are just wrong. These are the right days. And so you get a sense that these were things that were discussed and talked about and kind of known within culture, but there's never, I've yet to find a specific, this is why April the 21st, other than it's close to spring.
I got a question for you. Thinking about the humors and the idea of being whole, having everything in balance, mind, body, spirit, etc. Maybe I knew this a long time ago, or maybe I never understood it, but how is it that the church didn't have anything to say about these things? I mean, it seems like, even in Puritan days, blessings were regarded as health and wealth were regarded as signs of God's favor, and if you got the pox, or whatever, or misfortune, in some sense you deserved it. You must have pissed God off somehow or other.
Right.
And I'm just wondering, what was the church, whether Anglican or Catholic or whoever it was, during all these early hundreds of years, thinking about all this? And was this just like a little industry going on under the radar?
Oh no, they participated. The early modern body was all together, and so disease was considered normally that you did something to offend God. But the striking thing about the vernacular medical texts particularly is that they're not overly concerned with God.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see drawn out references like you'll see in some monastic pieces that talk about this is why you got illness.
Yeah.
You just see how to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's tied completely to if you end up knowing that you're going to die, being able to die well. But the church participated. Around, I think it's 1535, 1540, they put out, the Catholic Church, underground, put out their own remedy text. And then in 1550, the Pope at that time, John X, 12th, put out a text under his name that was printed by the King's Printer, which was unusual because by that time that you would already start to see the schism between the Anglican, Henry VIII, the great problem, and divorce. They participated. They were just part of it, and the monasteries were one of the primary centers of care. So if you were so bad that your family and your community couldn't take care of you, you ended up going to the church. And the nuns or the friars dispensed medicine. And it was the exact same type of medicine you'd find anywhere else. In the back, we're going to come get you.
Just a couple of things I want to say really quick to you, Kathy. If you think about the early university, of course, it was medicine, theology, literature, and there's one more that I'm forgetting what it is, but it was just those 4 disciplines, and they were all regarded as so intricately interconnected. But I'm thinking how wonderfully your talk actually ends up indicting us in terms of our own way of thinking about medicine. I love how you ended at that point, because well, on one hand, the kind of the message that we try to send out culturally is that all of this stuff is poo-poo. If it's not synthetic drugs, it's not real. And yet there are 2 domains where the doctors know that isn't true. And the one is psychiatric medicine, which is very much about the temperaments. So Zoloft might work for someone, Prozac may work for someone, and we don't call it temperaments per se, but psychiatric doctors do know that each person's brain chemistry is different and they will respond differently to different drugs. So that's one area. The other area you brought it up is prenatal care, where there, I was so shocked when I was reading the pregnancy book, and it said, be very careful about the herbal tea that you drink and things, and what spices you're using and all this stuff, that all of a sudden, we really have to believe in what they believed in 1500, because we might induce miscarriage, we might, all this stuff we've been so taught to sort of ignore the truth and validity of that vernacular knowledge up until certain points.
And that's something interesting when anybody asks me what I do and I give them that 30-second elevator speech, they'll go, well, what difference does any of that make? But being that I do research in modern medicine and how it's communicated, I've learned to be a better researcher about modern stuff because of the attention and the things that I've learned looking at all this old stuff. But the bigger point is they knew a lot better about care. The way that we've evolved, this particularly in the U.S., in healthcare in general, has really gone to you're the disease instead of the person. We can learn a lot about dispensing care and being better caregivers and how to make people feel better by going back to some of those older models. And that's one of the most intriguing things is some of the analogies and corresponding ideas and how they get played out and the push and pull of those things. Russ?
Yeah, it shouldn't be that surprising that church figures and other public figures at the time knew about medicine, because the modern concept of specialization didn't exist in early modern times in nearly the same degree that it does now. Francis Bacon said, I take all knowledge as my province. And he really meant that. I mean, he wasn't exaggerating.
Yeah.
So the people thought that they could know everything that there was to know. And I think you see that in Thomas Eliot and others who weren't just medical writers.
No, because you